time for our entertainment report. We catch up with Ian Horner every couple of weeks. We'll talk about his podcast he does with Craig Bennett, who I know you love as well, a little later. But Ian, good morning.
Good morning. How are you there, Clinton?
I'm good. Today we are talking about the legend, James Stewart.
I've had some wonderful opportunities to meet some fantastic people. But talking about James Stewart, I mean, was I so lucky to be able to talk to him? He was really nice too. And, you know, he reminds me so much of Tom Hanks. And I think you would be safe to say that Tom Hanks is the James Stewart of our generation. I spoke to him about the movie The Glenn Miller Story, which came out in 1954. He played Glenn Miller, the swing trombonist and band leader. And his wife was played by June Allison, who is such a sweetheart on screen. In fact, I even met her as well at one point. The movie was really famous because there was some wonderful stories about how Glenn Miller put his band together and how he produced some of his hits. He was famous not only for playing the trombone, but also for his particularly characteristic arrangements of swing music. And of course, this is a difficulty for James Stewart, who had to emulate playing the trombone. Well, the story about Glenn Miller is that he was a volunteer in the American Air Force in the entertainment unit, and in 1944, on December the 15th, which is 80 years ago this Sunday, he was in a plane and he disappeared in fog over the English Channel, and he was never found. James Stewart had a few impediments when it came to playing Glenn Miller. First of all, of course, he had to learn to play or to fake play the trombone, which is not an easy thing to do.
Goodness, no.
The second thing was at his age. By this stage, he was, let me think, no, Glenn Miller was 40 when he vanished. And in 1954, James Stewart was already 46.
I'm actually too old for the part. I think my biggest bit of luck in getting the part was that Helen Miller, Glenn's wife, she thought I would be all right. Although I was too old, she still said I'd be all right. So I think this was a big help to me.
Why was there such a long break between Miller's disappearance and the beginning of the movie?
Well, in the first place, Miller hadn't yet been declared dead by the military, and this was a problem, something that worried Helen Miller, too. That really was the main reason we couldn't do the picture earlier.
What was your favorite Miller track?
The piece of music?
Yes.
Moonlight Serenade.
That's a beautiful song.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful piece of music.
What was that you were playing? It's lovely.
A little exercise and working out for Schilling. I hope you liked it. It's not that good, though. It's just
I think it is.
Well, you like it as good as Little Brown Jug?
No, but I think you should do something with it.
Well, I suppose you could make a popular song out of it and get somebody to write you some lyrics. What's a good title?
Well, it should be soft and romantic. So like Moonlight.
Mm-hmm. Moonlight. Young lover under his sweetheart's window.
Mm-hmm.
And there's titles. Serenade in the Moonlight. Serenade in the Moonlight?
How about Moonlight Serenade?
Moonlight Serenade? Oh, not bad.
Well, I like that. It's kind of pretty.
Moonlight Serenade.
How did you learn to play the trombone so well, so quickly?
Well, it was pretty much tricked. What made it not as hard as some other instruments to appear correct was the different positions on the slide of the trombone. As a matter of fact, I had the mouthpiece plugged up so that I couldn't make any sound on the horn, which upset everybody, including Mrs. Miller. But with the help of a man by the name of Joe Ugle, who was a very fine trombone player, he figured out a way to write it almost like it was music, except the notes weren't notes of music, they were positions on the slide of the trombone.
Sort of like cheating.
Yeah.
Why is this movie still so popular?
I think the music, that music, although not much of it gets on television, when I was in Japan, before I came down to see you, one of the fellows from one of these orchestras said, they asked us to come over here to play in Tokyo for 10 days. We've been here for 3 months, playing all over Japan. It's still very popular music, and I have a feeling that it's going to have a very long life, this type of music.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Stewart.
You're quite welcome.
Ian's chat with James Stewart some years ago. You're so fortunate to speak to a legend like that, Ian.
I was indeed, yes. I couldn't believe my luck. He was terrific and he was so approachable. In fact, we went on to talk about other things as well. But before we did that, I had to ask him if he'd ever met Glenn Miller. And there was actually a bit of a coincidence there because they were both in the Air Force, the American Air Force, and they were both in the same base in England. And it just turned out that James Stewart missed meeting Glenn Miller only by a couple of hours.
Wow. What an amazing career he had. And, you know, we've lost so many legends over the years and everything must come to an end eventually.
Yes, unfortunately, but of course they live on in their work. That's the wonderful thing about good movie actors.
Yep.
You can see them at their peak in their prime. And some of the great works, you know, what they hold up over the decades. And I think the Glenn Miller story does. It's a really sweet movie.
Yeah. Now, tell me about your podcast. We've got to hear about that again.
Oh, sure, mate. Thank you. Look, at the moment, the most popular interview that's on there is with Tom Burlinson, the man from Snowy River. All these years later, after he'd done all the publicity for the film, decades later, he revisited that, and we had a wonderful chat. And he was so approachable, and I've got to say that's one of the most popular interviews in our podcast. Oh. The Gossip and the Critic, which is on YouTube.
The Gossip and the Critic that you, of course, do with Craig Bennett, and of course Craig's on the station all the time as well. And look, Tom Burlinson has a lot of connection to amount of our audience. That the issue of the Brumbies in the Snowy Mountains has been a big issue this year, particularly on this station, and I know that Tom Burlinson has been at the forefront of that. So great to be able to have a listen to that. We can go to your podcast and have a listen.
Too right, mate. Thank you.
Ian Horner.